Hey everyone, happy Monday. I'm just allowing folks to trickle in. Very excited about today's conversation with Sierra. I hope y'all have some notepad or something to take some notes. I know Sierra has already started a thread on Twitter as a resource for everyone in this chat. Let me drop it in here once more. Um, as always, feel free to, drop in the location where you're at in the chat. It's always cool to see who's tuning in from where. And we'll get started in just a second. Awesome. I see a lot of folks. Okay, I love that. Dallas, DMV. Love it, love it. You're holding it down for Atlanta, Sierra. Here is the thread that you'll be able to follow after this. Okay, Sierra, why don't you go ahead and give us an intro about who you are and what you do?
Uh, sorry, I'm like typing in the doc that I'm like looking at. um, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, wherever you are. I am Sierra King, Sierra Chastity, whichever one you want to go by. And I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm a photographer, archivist, and an artist. I went to Valdosta State University and I majored in art with a focus in photography, digital and film is what I'm currently like expressing. But I kind of landed in archiving by starting a project with Kathleen Cleaver and building her archive. And now I'm kind of looping back around to photography this year with documenting hopefully 100 Black women artists across the nation. So that is what I'm up to, and apparently I write really, really well. So it has helped me get some grants and get some situations going, and I hopefully you all will learn from just my I'm not going to like be really formal. I'm just going to give you very clear and concise about how I go about things and thinking. I'll bring in some reading and some sources, and I'll drop the link to that now. So this is like I'm starting like a research page kind of thing on Arena. And those are the artist statements and articles and definitions that I've been like looking at. Um, well, I've always been looking at like throughout my like career and life, but just want them all in one place so I can like stop digging.
Sierra is being super humble, of course. So, for those who don't know, Sierra was one of the first guests last year when we did a session on grant writing 101, because you racked up a lot of money with grants through your writing and through your art statements. And so, I guess, like, to get started, um, what is the purpose of an artist statement for those who may not know? What is it for? I mean, most people use it for grants and whatnot, but why is it important to have one? And then I guess then we can jump into like the best practices of an artist statement, writing one.
Yeah, so I really believe that like an artist statement is just like the definition of who you are as an artist and as a photographer, or however you define what you're doing in this current moment. And it really just grounds you in whatever project or whatever you've already done. And it's also like very humbling to see um, like your timeline of things. There's different versions of artist statements that you can go about, and it's also very nice to see like your words and your definition of yourself reiterated in your relationships with writers and critics. So there's like the secret really is that writers and critics don't actually like writing, and so that was like one of the first things that my mentor told me was like they'd rather copy and paste from what you've already done and write something around it. So if you have a great statement or if you have a great artist bio or if you've already had things written about your work, they're just going to fill in the pieces based on timeliness. And so it's very important for your statement to be clear and it's very important for it to be concise, but also still providing some personality to what your work is and where it's going.
Thank you. And then we could just jump into some of the best practices. I know on Twitter and that thread I dropped in the chat, you already started doing like the do's slash don'ts of what an artist statement should include. But to hear from you, what are some of the do's and then the don'ts? And then if you have any examples that you want to share with us.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and share my screen. Uh, so, can you all see that?
Yes, looks good.
All right. Don't know how to spell a statement. All right. It's like this quote I have here. Also, we'll fill this in when we get done. But this is from Bell Hooks' Art on My Mind. So artists have to engage in the process of education that encourages critical consciousness and enables them as individuals to break hold the colonizing representations. Once that process is completed, they have then have a space to map a new terrain, one that only can emerge from. Can you all still hear me? It's telling me my internet is stable.
Yeah, you're
Okay.
still good.
One that can only emerge from an imaginative intentiveness since there's no body of images, no tradition to draw on. Concurrently, even after the images are in place, the art world may lack a critical language to speak to the complexities these images invoke. To see a new and different images of blackness is to some extent shocking. Some Since the images that are counter hemogenic are necessarily provocative, their seductiveness, their allure lie in the freshness of insight and vision. They fulfill longing that are oftentimes not yet articulated in words. The longing to look at blackness in ways that resist and go beyond the stereotypes. Um, and that's a quote that I just hold on to a lot because it just reminds me that the work that I'm making and the work that I have made may not have the words, may not have been given the words in context of Blackness, because in the art world and places that we've been are mostly white patriarchal men, capitalistic. So like, and when you're making work about Black people, um, there aren't a lot of black critics, and so the lacking those black critics, you're not necessarily getting the words that match up to the images that you're making. And so Lorna Simpson, Carrie Mae Weems, all those artists during those times were often getting a lot of bad criticism about their work because it was seen in a different gaze and it was being written about in a different gaze. And so when you write your artist statement, or you're continually revising, I just encourage you all to like let your work speak for itself sometimes, but then also you have to be actively looking for the words that you want to describe your work. And if that's reading other statements, if that's reading other books, if that's reading things that are um, in conversation with what your work is doing. And so these are kind of like the six things that I kind of look for, kind of like check myself on. What are you doing? what is the project and series that you're working on, and then what is the name, title, and tagline for that. So if you have a name, that may not necessarily be the final name, but you can also have a formal title. So you can these things work concurrently, but you don't necessarily have to present them at the same time. And then I always like to have like a tagline with my project or series. So it's like a one sentence like hook that can like just grab the audience's attention. Rather, if they, because most people don't read, so they just need one sentence really to kind of grab them about like what the work is. So, for example, one of the projects that I'm working on um, right now is called Through Line, um, and the tagline for it is "Where the lives of and that tells you everything about the project that I want you to know, right? Um, I'm documenting lives of Black women artists, and I'm really interrogating and exploring where they intersect. And so it's a very clear and concise tagline that makes people want to look more into the project or ask me more questions or see more details or even see the images of what exactly that is. And then so how you're doing it is the technique or medium. You don't have to include that in the tagline, but this is where you actually get into the writing of it. So the technique and medium that I'm doing, I'll use through line as my example because I'm working on it now. So the technique and medium that I'm using for through line, and I'll make it C to kind of go back and forth between that is digital film, and I'm using audio too, but that doesn't matter right now. So digital and film photography, um, sometimes color, sometimes black and white, um, and I am also I'm going to be experimenting with uh, a reduction or damage process. So basically, I'm doing digital and film photography, and then eventually I want to bring in an aspect of damaging the photographs with water, and that's specifically to my experience. But okay, why am I damaging the photographs in water? Right. So this gets to the third question. Why are you doing that? Well, my experience. My house flooded in 2009, 2010. So bringing in my house flooded in 2009, 2010, and a lot of photographs that are in this project have water damage. And so by me creating more photographs and then introducing the damage process, like introducing water back into these new photographs, I'm kind of taking back the control of that what happened to the photographs beforehand. Um, and I haven't really thought about this statement all the way through, so I'm actually working in real time with you right now. So, yeah, so my house flooded in 2009, and I kind of want to explore um, just taking back control of that experience and putting the photographs in water, um, and how that will change the photographs, how that will change the meaning, and more so, what is that process of damage and reduction due to my work. Some philosophy and influence. When you get into philosophy, really, you can just talk about like where your work is situated in the canon. If you're a self-taught photographer, the canon is just people, contemporaries that are also in the industry. So you're just when you name people like Lorna Simpson, Carrie Mae Weems, um, who else is Latoya Ruby Frazier, uh, Claudette Johnson. So who are the artists that I'm looking at consistently, and how does their work influence how I shoot, or how does their work influence the processes that I'm looking at? So Carrie Mae Weems, you may see a lot of the same compositions in my work. Lorna Simpson, you may see me doing uh, certain reduction processes. She's done some water damage in her work as well, and done some installation work. So that's kind of where I pull from there. Claudette Johnson, she's just a Black woman artist that looks at Black women and how they experience space. And so when you're thinking about this, um, you are placing your work in those conversations that they've always been placed in. So does that make sense? Am I talking fast? I know I can like. Okay. So you're placing your work in those conversations, and then, like you can see, when I'm thinking about them, you can see that I'm pulling certain aspects from their practices, not their entirety, but I'm able to have a conversation and able to bring another project of theirs. So if you think about composition, you may think about from Carrie Mae Weems, her black and white work, or her kitchen table series, and then I can show you in my work, okay, this is what hers look like, and here's an image from this through line series that may identify with that. And you can start a conversation with people doing that. Where are you doing it? So location. Um, I'm in my studio right now. Hold on. And this guy's like coming up to the window. Okay, sorry about that. Um, so location wise, where are you doing it? Although I'm located in Atlanta, starting locally, right? I want to expand the project nationally. And that kind of leads to how are you going to do that? Maybe a form, an interest. You don't have to necessarily add that in your statement, but you can say like reaching out to people, to artists that I've collided with. At least that's what I'm saying, and I have been saying in conversation. And who's this work for? So the community and audience, necessarily community and audience can be two different things. So the community is who you're making it with, and the audience is who is looking at it. And so those can change either based on the timeline of the project or where you present your work. So the community can be the same, but the audiences can change. So my community is Black women artists, um, and the audience may be currently I'm in a studio residency, so it's installed there. So that's where it's, I would say, currently installed. You can kind of tag on Atlanta, Georgia there. And then the duration for the rest of my life, right? But if you want to be like concise and like if it's for application or if it's for a specific grant, then you might have be restrained to saying from like a certain time period, like January 2020 to December 2021 is how long the project has been like in conception. Um, is that a good stopping point, or does anybody have any questions?
Does anyone have any immediate questions? If so, feel free to drop it in the chat. If not, you can feel free to continue.
I have a question.
Yeah, who's
Go
that?
ahead,
I can
Bridget.
chime in. So basically, my artist statement can change with every single project. I wouldn't necessarily use the same artist statement just forever.
Yes and no. So when I get further into like the types of statements, they can be project based, but I feel that like once you know your project, your like the type of statement that you're kind of addressing is like one that has like a bio in the front of it. It kind of has like a conclusion at the end of it, to whereas they have a bio and then they have their current project, and then they have like a third person. This is what Sierra's done. This is her awards. This is where she's going. This is where the project is currently installed. The end. I have a cat, right? um, and then so when I'm also writing, I'm also thinking about where do I want these words to go. I know we get stuck into a lot of about we hate writing, or we don't like writing about our work, or really get overwhelmed about like just putting the statement of what we do in one place. But I like doing a lot of future thinking, so and also like not being humble about it. So if if I want this to end up, this work will end up in a press release. And also get yourself in the habit of talking about your work and talking about your practice in future tense, so that you're guiding yourself into where you want to go, because we're alone all the time and nobody's going to tell us these things. So if I want my work to end up in the museum, saying I'm going to sit down at the computer and be like, all right, I'm going to write a press release for the National Museum of African American History today about Throughline. And that gets me excited, right? I'm not writing just a plain statement. I'm not writing just something that will go on my website. I get excited about press releases because that means I'm doing something. That means my work is being recognized, and also just for like grant projects or grant submissions and proposals. If you've already written a press release, go ahead and put it in there, because that shows them that you're thinking forward, and more than likely they'll go ahead and use it. Remember, people hate writing. People hate writing. So if you want to control your narrative and you want to share your work in the way that you want it, you need to write it first. No matter how bad you think it is, no matter how like unorganized it is, you need to write it first. And if you need that additional help, or if you need additional like eyes on it, then get it there. But don't allow anyone else to uh, write it for you. Now, you can, if you do have learning disabilities, I want to get into accessibility. If you do have learning disabilities, or like dyslexia or ADHD, or you're neurodivergent and need someone to like transcribe with you, um, start speaking, start talking into audio, and talk to yourself about your work. Google, I'll figure out later, but Google Docs does have a tool on here that you can speak directly into the document. So if you're having trouble starting, just go ahead and speak into the documents, or turn on the video, turn on audio, and just get your words out there, rather than like feeling you have to like be still and sitting there. So yeah, those are like an exercise you can do as far as like future thinking, and then getting into like writing. Um, Outside of press release, I want this work to go into a book. I want this work to be a book eventually. So how am I going to get that done? Who do I want the forward to be written by? Um, what publications do I want this work to go into, and how do they already? What language are they already using? So if you look at the publications like Aperture or Creative, what's that other one? I know Aperture is here because I'm looking at Daryl Bay's book. Uh, Cara Walker's was published. Not sure how what Cara Walker's was published. Uh, if you want your work to be have an exhibition catalog published, what museums publish their own exhibition catalogs, or do they outsource them? And try to get a hold of them and read their work and see the language of that. what podcast do you want your work to be talked about in? They usually ask for statements, small statements that can be put in the description of the podcast. So they're going to ask for that when you get interviewed by the podcast. Um, so answering, kind of getting to Bria's question, there's different types of statements that I've written for myself. And it's conversational. There's conversational, clear and concise. There's a disruptive statement that is just like a stream of consciousness and poetic. There's a timeline or a third person, which kind of goes into like the awards and current projects, which is like, here's all the like great things that I've done. Um, I'm a great person. I'm a great artist. You can't like knock me off my hustle type of statement. Like I'm worth what I'm worth. So, and the fourth one is just like a clean bio statement. So this isn't Daoubei's statement, but it was just a real clear and concise like expert that I pulled out from his books. So he's saying my ideas have largely centered around the human subject. I'm interested in visualizing the human community in a broad range of contexts. The strategy and context may change, but it's always a person or people sitting or standing in front of the camera. Pictures of people in front of the camera, that describes everything that I've done for 40 years, every single picture. And so I think this is him looking across the retrospective of his work and like really sitting back like, dang, like I don't do nothing else but look at people and put them in front of a camera. What more else do I need to say to you? Like, like that's everything I've done for the like entirety of my life. Um, Now he may go into a broader statement of like uh, what these pictures address as far as like race, sexuality, class, patriarchy, like the different topics. But essentially, when he gets down to it, he's just pictures of people in front of my camera. And if that's you, you can be like, you can say that as well. Pictures of people in front of my camera. And the difference for your experience is that you may be a black woman experiencing the intersectionalities of race, class, systems, capitalism, and you can tell in your statement how they're addressing those things. And so going through, I'm just going to highlight it a little bit. What? So the what is human community. That also is kind of who. Um, he didn't really say the why here, like I said. So a broad range of context. Um, where he didn't say where here, but I know he's based in New York. So a lot of his work is in New York, and that's just me knowing him as an artist. But he's everywhere, right? He's a little bit everywhere because people have commissioned him. He's been in residencies. He's done some national work. He's done some global work. So everywhere, but mostly New York. And then how um, he sits or stands a person in front of his. Just by knowing his work, he shoots film. So he does a lot of media format. Um, so I really like I do this exercise a lot. I read other people like articles and like what other how they're talking about their work, and you can just sit down and like, okay, what is the what is the how, what is the why, what is the where and the who, and that's the basics of what you need to convey in your project or your work. Um, and then Cara Walker. I'm not gonna. I'm also going to give this to you all. I know we may not have enough time to actually go through all of them, but I like Cara Walker's statements because she's a disruptor.
Oh, you're breaking up a little bit.
She really likes telling you about her work, but not really.
Oh, you're frozen, Sierra.
She gives you a stream of consciousness. She gives you. Oh, can you hear me now? I'm on my phone internet, so but is it is it not breaking up? Is it back?
It's back now. I was chuckling because of Erica's comment,
Oh.
but it's back now.
um. Okay. How long should your art statement be? Uh. I. It depends. I say write the longest one you can write, and then edit it down from there. A good exercise is to do a 250 bio statement, a 550 bio statement, a 750 bio statement, and a 1500 bio statement. So if you start with the 1500 word limit, then you can edit it down to all of those. Um, and yeah,
That's such
and
a
then
great exercise because thinking about like applications, like it all will vary in length. And sometimes the requirement is as long as 1500, other times it's 100, 200. And I really love that. And it kind of also reminds me of what I asked you over email um, of we're going to give y'all some homework for part 2. We'd love to have you all practice on these artist statements, that exercise. And in a few weeks, Sierra will be back and we'll be taking a look at everyone's artist statements. So if you can repeat those the word length counts again.
100, 250, 550, 750, and 1500. And I'll put it in the doc too. So I'll send this doc over to Polly in like a PDF and drop it in Slack, so that you all can see this.
That is perfect. So everyone hears that, and I will send this out again. But this is your homework. Before I forget, this is your homework assignment to practice on that because you can only get better with actual practice. And so starting with whichever you want to start with, but when we come back in a few weeks, we want to see what you all have started. And yes, I can add you to the Slack group. Sorry, go ahead, Sarah.
How much time do I have left?
20 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, I was yeah, those are the length things. So, but getting back into the types of statements. So, Cara Walker deals with she does a lot of disruptor um stream of consciousness poetic type of statements. Uh I'm not going to share my screen anymore. I'll just talk through it so it'll keep the connectivity going. And she talks about her work in a way that it's not. It really gets into what Bell Hooks was talking about as far as like she's not speaking to the white gaze. She's really just giving you her consciousness about why she's making the work that she's making. And once you, I'm not saying once you get to a point of Cara Walker's like stance as an artist, like you can do that. No, do that now. Like make that write that stream of consciousness and that poetic version of your work of your statements now, so that you can use that. You can use it for anything else. So those can like lend to essays or project answers or anything on applications, and you can pull from that language. And then it's also a very good practice of being able to speak about your work, um, having your consciousness written down so that like when you do get in conversation, it's more of a script. Because I like when people ask me about my work, it's like an outer body experience. I'm not here. You're talking to like my spirit. I don't know what you're saying. If you record it, I'll be like, wow, that's great. I don't know what I just said. So really getting to a habit of doing that, because it can just become like muscle body memory, rather than like you trying to pull something out of your brain all the time. And I'll give you the link for her statement that she has in her newest book. Um, and then the great of all greats, Carrie Mae Weems, will tell you about everything that she's ever done in her entire life. And a lot of people like telling you about what she's done in her entire like timeline, and even her website. Um, the first page that you come across is a full timeline of her work. So she's really just like, here's what I've done, here's why I did it, here's how these projects intersect, here's what I'm doing now, here's all the awards, the accolades, the honors. Here's how this project is still like encouraging me to make more work in this contemporary, even though I was still an artist. Carrie Mae Weems. Um, she is a photographer from Portland, Oregon. I'm gonna read a bit of her like philosophy and influence. So Weems was influenced by the work of earlier African American photographers who documented the Black experience, notably Roy DeCarva. She began to refer to herself as the image maker. Weems' early images explored personal and familial themes and often were accompanied by text and audio recordings. Her seminal work, the Kitchen Table series, a narrative cycle of staged photographs, depicts seemingly mundane episodes from a woman's life without that space within the space of her kitchen. So even just that paragraph, remembering what we talked about earlier, that kind of it hits everything that that I was speaking about. It gives you who she's in conversation with, Roy DeCarver. She titles herself as the image maker, or where her work is like coming from. She gives you what her work is addressing, personal and familial themes. And then it also gives you the technique. We know she's a photographer, but it also lets you know that she's using text and audio recordings. And then she's grounded that particular series as the series that has been the foundation of who she is as an artist. So she uses the word seminal. I'm not going to get be able to get really too much into vocabulary, but when you read these statements, you'll start seeing vocabulary like seminal, integral, ongoing, um, photographic, environmental, African American, Black, text, audio, mundane. So when you go through these statements, it's good to do like a glossary of like words um, that are just grounding the piece, grounding the statement, and even for yourself. Um, in my practice, I have my own vocabulary and own bank of words and keywords that I use, that I just pull from. Like I have a Google Doc that's just full of words that I like using. Do that, because like you sit down in a blank document and you're like, okay, I don't know words, I don't know English, I don't know how to write right now. But if you just copy and paste that glossary of words that are connected to your work, I say that's another part of the homework is like come up with a keyword or a glossary for your work. And right now I have around maybe like 25 to 100 words that I use consistently when I speak about my work, when I write about my work, when I talk to other people about my work. So if you can't come up with 25 to 100, then start with 5 to 10. Then you can get to 15 to 20, then 25 to 50, then 50 to 100. And that will also help when you start writing longer statements about your work. Um, so, yeah. Because you'll start seeing, you can also pair their statements with the articles that are being written about their work, and you'll see the same keywords. So when you start seeing the same keywords written about their work in articles, you know they're doing something right, because they're teaching people, educating people about how to write their work. So remember that first. Um, that first quote that I said from um, Bell Hooks, you are in charge of the education process of your work. You have to teach people about your work. You have to um, give them the tools and the things that they need to have a concise and a clear and a consistent conversation about your work. You don't want to ever feel like you're defending your work. You don't want to ever feel small about your work. You want to feel confident and be able to say, this is what my work is, and this is why I'm doing it, and I'm not going to let you change anything about that. Now, you can have a critique about it, and we can say this is something that I can improve on, but I'm not. This is not what this is. Everything I've said about my work in my statement is non-negotiable. Now, the third part of this like artist statement thing is like revision. Like we change and we evolve and we like have different things that we're experiencing. So like I'm in like a revision state of my work and I have no idea who I am right now. So it's like everything that I written for 2020 and everything that got me money in 2020, everything that people got excited about in 2020 has nothing to do with my work. Like it has nothing to do with what I'm doing, and Throughline, it has nothing to do with what I'm doing with Black women artists. And so I have to go back and I have to sit with myself and be like, why? What am I doing? Where are the words? And so you see like this, like I don't know. I'm gonna put my computer up. So you see all those books back there, right? All those books, like so get you a library, build you a library that you don't have to access by anyone else. Get you a space, something to where like that you're just pulling information from. So that arena space that I'm building is just going to kind of be like a reflection of my library, and really allow me to just dig into the information more, but also give me a place to go back to when I want to revise. So that's like the third part of it. Don't get too excited. Focus on your vocabulary. Focus on those word links. If you're still in like the beginning phases of it, of writing. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions right now? I know we're getting up on time.
This is so helpful. So first, thank you. If there are any burning questions, feel free to drop it in the chat. As a reminder, you now have 2 homework assignments. So get started on that after this. I'm hoping we'll meet again in 2 weeks, but the date is to be determined. So you will get an update on that when that is scheduled. But so for now, just like plan 2 weeks from now, hopefully. If there aren't any questions, Sierra, what has been, I guess, the biggest lesson learned or thing that you've learned from all the artist statements you've written so far and how you've been able to tailor it to different grants? Like what is like, I guess, the hardest part of, switching it up, or any biggest things that you've learned so far from all the different writing you've done?
Last year I just started from the project statement, and I wrote my bio and I updated my bio and my conclusion around that. And so depending on what I was applying for, depending on the word count, those things would change. But I would always let people know. I had a COVID statement for last year, like I've lost $10,000, blah, blah, blah. And that would just be like grounding and going into the work that I was creating. So if you don't want to write things over and over again, and you notice that things are the same questions are being asked in the things that you're applying to, um, just write a general answer to that question. Also, it's helpful to look at applications um, that you want to apply to but don't feel ready to, and go ahead and answer those questions and go ahead and sit with those questions, so that like you can just have an idea of where you want to get started there. How do you create that depth that you're getting from your library, especially as a Black woman who might not be influenced by Black women creatives? Um, yeah, I've been doing that for like my like entire like existence. Like the question that I'm answering in my work is like, where are the Black women artists? So that's just like that's just a personal question I'm answering and like digging after. So it's just a matter of like just doing it all of the way, like actively going to look for it. And so I can, Mumby, I can give you a list of artists that you can kind of get into. It's it's just a list, really. It's just a long list, and it depends. I can't really tell you which one you might gravitate to without seeing your work. So, like, and it doesn't have to be Black woman artists. Like, you can be influenced by anyone else. You can be influenced by the white man, but you can also say like Jasmine. Jasmine is over here in my studio mate. She's influenced by Pierre Mindron. He's a French artist, and he does compositions with the primary colors red, green, and blue. Red, blue, and yellows. I've been out of art school for a while. Anyways, so she uses that in her work, not necessarily the color palette, but the style, the composition style. So just taking pieces of different people's practices, taking pieces of different people's compositions, elements of this kind of also gets into what techniques, what kind of styles do you want to practice? What do you want to explore? What are you investigating? So I think to really answer that question, I'll have to sit with you, Mumby, and really like get into like what your practice is, because it's a real general answer, but to give you something specific or to give you an artist that you may gravitate to, I would have to know a bit more about your practice.
And to answer the next question, Kiara, we're just talking about in general. There is no specific application that we are referencing here. This is very open, just what you may come across kind of thing.
I can drop an application.
Yeah, feel free. And we have about 10 minutes remaining. So again, if you have any questions, if you have an example that you want us to peek at, feel free to drop it in. But we're going to meet again in a few weeks to go over the homework assignment. And so for those who may have hopped in late, we are going to be planning again to look at everyone's artist statements. Sierra, what were the two things again? Just to like run through. It was one, we're gonna do. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
The keyword and glossary.
Yes.
So 10 to 15 words at minimum. I know it's a 2 week deadline, but my personal keyword and glossary is like probably up to 100 in my head right now. And if you want to be excessive and compulsive like me, I would say write the keywords and then also have the definition, the standard English definition, but then also come up with your own definition. And I'll write this in the doc too. And then for the other part of it was to do word count statements. So you would do 100, 250, 550, 750, and 1500 for your words, for your statements. Because those are all the different word links that applications usually ask for.
Perfect. Thank you. And I just dropped in the chat that I'll remind everyone, like when there's a week out before like the deadline, I'll remind you all. And this is just like, accountability kind of deadline that we're setting for everyone. And so I'll remind it in Slack, and then I'll ask everyone to submit at least one statement ahead of time that we can look through at our next conversation. Sierra, what are some of the, maybe the don'ts? Because I feel like you kind of covered a great overview of like the basics, but like, what are the things that you feel like would get artists looked over because I don't know, maybe they're trying too hard, maybe they're not allowing their work to speak for themselves. What is it in your opinion?
Um, I would say the stream of consciousness statements. Those are like very, like you really have to like your work really has to be like solid for me to read a stream of consciousness. I don't have a lot of time. So when you're applying to these grants and you're applying to like these proposals, stream of consciousness really isn't your best bet to go for. I don't want to hear a narrative about your life and how you're 5 years old. I don't want to read about how you experience trauma. Now, and this is my me putting on my like reading grants. While they may have been important to your experience, I'm not saying that they and why you create your work. I still need you to be clear and concise about that. And so uh, you get, and it's also kind of tricky when you get into that space of saying that because you get into the space of reading it in the lens of a white male because they don't want to hear about a black woman's experience. So it just depends. It's a very thin line of like that narrative and clear and stream of consciousness when you're submitting to grants. Specifically, I would say leave the stream of consciousness for your websites, for interviews, um, for portfolios, for just your own personal archive, until you get to like a certain point where nobody cares, or you're not asking for $50,000. Yeah.
And do you feel like, because you mentioned some of the places where an artist statement um, should live, and you said website was one of them. So do you think that people should have a bio in an artist statement, or should it just be like one? Because I've seen people do both, but would that be confusing? What do you think?
Um, Naturally, if you have a bio on your website, it can be an about. If you want to have separate statements, it can be in the galleries of those projects. So they can be your statements for each project can be with the work that it deals with, or you can have a the bio statement combo, where it's that like it has the bio and then it has the statements, and then you link each of the projects, and just like briefly touch on your process and techniques that you're using currently, and then these are the projects that are using X, Y, and Z. Those can kind of the format, so that can kind of vary. It just depends on like if you're working with a writer to write those things, or if you kind of have like a fall into like a format that you want to use consistently. But that's kind of like more one-on-one preference type of thing.
Gotcha. Um, Looking at the time, there's 3 minutes left. Anyone have any last minute questions on the basics of how to write an artist statement?
I
Just
have one question.
yeah, go ahead, Bria.
This is also about like where they live. So when you're doing when like I've had a few exhibitions where they're like, oh, send me your bio. But is it bio? Is it artist statement? Is it a combination of both? What is the appropriate length for like your panel talking about you in an exhibition space?
When you say exhibition, would it be like solo, or would it just be like a group, or
Solo.
solo exhibition? So
Or I guess both. I guess I've in both situations they've asked for
okay,
that.
so let me drop a link for you really quick. Um, and I can also add the press release and the my exhibition statement. So the exhibition that I curated this last year, that's the statement that is on the wall that they like paste on the wall, and then but my bio that specifically talks about me was in like a it's in like a binder. So it doesn't necessarily, or they might have like depending on where the space is. I know sometimes they have like a photo of the artist and their bio, but that doesn't have to get into the work. It can just be like, uh, I was born, I lived, I died. You didn't die, but you get it. Yeah. The actual statement of the work is what you're pasting on the wall, or statement of the show. And
I
so
see.
like you see that picture, to where it has the statement next to under the title of the show. Um, that's where that live. And kind of like that small,
Okay.
um, a good practice is one sentence about yourself. So in addition to that, like I guess the least one was 100, but if you can do one sentence about yourself, then you're on your way. So my one sentence about myself is Sierra King, an artist, archivist, and curator who is deeply committed to documenting, preserving, and archiving the work and contributions of Black women artists. That's everything you need to know about me in one sentence.
So kind of like the elevator pitch.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be 60 seconds. I'm Black. I don't have time.
Amen.
And it's very concise. I love that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bria, for your question. We are out of time. So again, if you have any questions that come up afterwards, feel free to send me a message and we can touch base on them in the next chat. And again, for those who may have missed it for the third or fourth time, you have 2 homework assignments that I will remind everyone about. Trying to hold all y'all accountable, because I know if we don't set a deadline, we probably won't get started on it. But our art statement is so vital and so crucial, especially for when you apply for grants and whatnot. So we'll touch base in a few weeks. And thank you, Sierra, so much for your time.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Bye, y'all.